A convenience store felt like the last place anything dramatic would happen. Fluorescent lights buzzed. A clerk rang up a pack of cigarettes. The customer at the counter leaned in casually like he'd done this 100 times. Then, in one small motion, everything changed. He lifted his shirt just enough to show the gun tucked into his waistband. The steel glinted for a second. He pulled it out and aimed it straight at the clerk. The clerk's hands started moving faster, scooping bills from the register and dropping them into a bag. You could see him trying to keep his face calm while his eyes stayed locked on the weapon. To the robber, it looked like the perfect moment. No one else in the store. Money in hand, door wide open. He turned to leave, already imagining his escape, and walked right into a police sergeant. The officer hadn't come in for a call. He was just stopping by off the clock to grab something. But the way the suspect stiffened and tried to rush past told him everything he needed to know. In an instant, the sergeant went from shopper to cop. He cut off the suspect's path, grabbed him, and drove him back into the store. The robber barely had time to think, let alone aim his weapon. Within seconds, he was on the floor handcuffed, the stolen cash spilling out beside him. It was supposed to be a simple date night. A couple sat in a booth at a Louisville restaurant, sharing food and talking quietly. The room felt relaxed. You could see other customers eating, workers moving around behind the counter, and nothing looked dangerous. Then the door opened, and a masked man walked in with a purpose that didn't fit the scene. He headed straight to the counter, lifted his shirt, and showed the employee his gun. The worker's hands shot up. He started pulling money from the drawer while the man leaned over, demanding more. From another angle, you could see the couple in the booth pause mid-conversation. The woman's hands rose slightly, her body stiffening as she watched what was happening. They weren't just any couple out for dinner. They were both police officers, off duty but never really off. They looked at each other for half a second, just enough to agree without saying a word. Then they moved. Chairs slid back, hands went to their off-duty pistols. They stood up in sync, weapons drawn, voices firm and clear. The robber, who had been completely focused on the cashier, suddenly found himself facing two armed people who were not afraid of him at all. He ran for the door. They chased him outside, sprinting across the parking lot. A block away, they finally caught up, stopping him before he could disappear into the night. Two men in neat clothes walked down the sidewalk toward a travel agency. From the street, they looked like regular customers. Inside, employees sat at desks, talking on phones and staring at screens covered in photos of sunny destinations. Once the men stepped inside, their real plan became clear. One pulled out a gun and pointed it at the nearest worker. Voices went sharp. Phones, money, and even access codes were demanded. Workers handed over everything with trembling hands, surrounded by glass walls that made them feel exposed and trapped at the same time. But that same glass gave them one big advantage. People outside could see. Passers-by noticed the strange movement inside and the fear on the workers' faces. Someone called the police. Officers nearby were alerted and moved quickly, setting up outside the glass doors. Instead of rushing in blindly, they surrounded the agency and then stepped in together. The robbers weren't ready for that. Under the pressure of multiple officers pushing in, weapons drawn and commands shouted, one suspect dropped his gun onto a chair. The other lifted his hands high, his fake confidence gone in an instant. Both were ordered to the ground and handcuffed where they lay. Another street, another early morning. A worker walked alone on the sidewalk, backpack on, shoulders a little slumped from a long shift. A motorcycle with two people rolled by once. Nothing strange. Then it came back. This time, it stopped right beside him. The passenger stepped off, snatched the worker's phone, and moved to jump back onto the bike. Most victims would have just watched their belongings vanish. But this man snapped. In one rough shove, he pushed the robber away from the motorcycle. The suspect fell, dragging the bike and its driver down with him. For a second, all three men were tangled on the ground, and the easy robbery turned into a messy fight. That was when another motorcycle appeared. On it sat an officer, weapon already drawn. He ordered the suspects to stop and surrender. Instead of giving up, they made a motion as if reaching toward their waists, like they might be going for a weapon or trying to run. The officer had to decide in a heartbeat. He fired. The two suspects tried to bolt, but only made it a short distance before collapsing. Emergency services were called, but both men died at the scene. The worker got his phone back. He walked away shaken but alive. His life saved by his own courage and a passing officer who refused to ignore danger. A bakery, warm lights, and the soft sound of people talking. A worker restocked drinks in a freezer. A customer in a white shirt sat quietly at a table, scrolling on his phone. Then the door opened, and a man in a full-face helmet walked in holding a gun. He didn't take off the helmet. That alone should have been a warning. He pointed the gun, shouted his demands, and forced the customer to hand over his phone. The worker ran to the back, ducking behind the counter. For a moment, it seemed as though the robber owned the room. Outside, though, lights flashed. Police motorcycles pulled up fast. Officers rushed through the door with weapons already drawn. The robber turned, caught between the counter, the customer, and multiple officers pressing forward. There was nowhere to go. In the chaos, a shot rang out and the robber fell to the floor wounded. An officer moved in, kicked the gun away, and secured the suspect while calling for backup and medical help. The bakery went from calm to terror to relief in less than a minute. One robber down, no victims hurt, and a strong reminder that sometimes help really is just outside the door. It was a little after 9 p.m., and the pharmacy was winding down. A few customers stood by the counter chatting with an employee who was finishing work on the computer. Everything felt calm and ordinary. Then the door burst open. Two men rushed inside, one in a black jacket, the other in blue. They didn't pause or hide their intentions. The man in black pulled out a gun and pointed it at everyone in the store. People froze. The employee stepped back with both hands raised. The whole room changed in seconds. But the robbers didn't realize something important. One of the customers was an undercover police officer. He had already noticed the two acting suspiciously outside. The moment the gunman looked away, the officer reacted. He drew his weapon and fired, hitting the suspect in black. Even wounded, the robber tried to shoot back and struck the officer in the leg. The officer fell, knocking over a shelf, but he didn't stop. From the floor, he steadied his arm and fired again until the gunman dropped for good. The second suspect, the one in blue, was also hit and fell near the entrance. The pharmacy went silent. Shelves were scattered. Customers were hiding behind the counter, and the officer stayed down but alert, keeping his weapon pointed toward the door until help arrived. Paramedics took him to the hospital, and the two suspects were arrested after receiving medical care.